one of the very good teachers of the department. He has an impressive biodata to his credit. He is nationally known and nationally acclaimed for his scholarship in the field of international relations. And you students have also had the opportunity to witness his scholarship in the class, his teaching abilities in the class. But what appeals to me most about him, and I'm sure it appeals to you, to his students also, is the clarity in his thinking, his up-to-date and crisp information levels, and above all, his lucid explanation of complex international problems. Today, he is going to speak on the theoretical dimensions of Sino-Indian relations. And once again, we will hear him covering a long time span and a very complex history of two strange neighbors in his characteristic ease and charm which he has in his style. So, thank you very much.
Good evening, one and all. Hope I am audible.
Yes, yes.
So, first of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our head of the department, Professor Subharaoji, who has been the person behind this lecture series and asking me to speak today to the students and faculty to a topic which is relevant to students, department, our discipline. And on my own, I have chosen this topic of theorizing Sino-Indian relations. So, dear faculty members and dear students, you all are familiar with my class teaching and the theories which I am going to discuss today. This I have already taught to my MA students because we have one paper on IR theory. So today I will be using those theory to understand the ever-evolving and very contentious this Sino-Indian relations, the India-China relationship. So in the beginning, I would like to clarify because there are many theories. All the theories, it is not possible at all to use here in one lecture of 1 hour. So I have identified only 4 theories, and these 4 theories happen to be the dominant theories of international relations. The first theory which I will be using will be the realism, that is well-known theory of international relations. The second theory, which is rival to realism, is the international liberalism. And the third theory, because unless and until the Marxist thing is not coming into the picture, any theoretical discussion is never complete. So I will be using certain neo-Marxist theories like word system theory of Immanuel Wallerstein, the dependency theory developed by the Latin American economist. So that theory also will be I'll be using to understand India-China relations. And lastly, because again, unless and until we are not talking about the post-positivism, so if any post-positivist theory is not discussed, so even any discussion about theory is not complete. So at least once post-positivist theory, that is social constructivism, and in IR that has been developed by Alexander Wendt. So that theory I will be using. So these are the 4 theories which I will use to understand, to explain the India-China relations. So firstly, very briefly, I will talk about the significance of India-China relations here. Because we all know that India-China relation has its bilateral implication has its regional implication and has its global implication also. We all know that India and China both are the rising powers, and the rising powers, as in international relations we say, has always created instability in the world order, in the international system. If you look at the world history, we find that the rising power has always destabilized the world order, the global order. It has happened in the past when the Germany was rising under Kaiser William. It led to the First World War. Germany was rising again under Hitler, and then again it led to the Second World War. And now China is rising, and simultaneously India is also rising. So whether the rise of these two countries, particularly the rise of China, will again destabilize the global order, the regional order, or history will not repeat itself, and as China claims that its rise is a peaceful rise. So still it is too early to say anything whether China's rise will be the peaceful rise. And at the same time, India is also rising. It's not at the pace of China, but definitely it is also rising. And the rising India and China has been noticed by the entire international community. And both these countries are taken seriously. Though China is dismissive about India's power, they treat India as a power which has influence only in South Asia. But that is not case with the international community. International community is not treating India as the only power which has significance only in the South Asia subcontinent. But they treat it as an emerging power, emerging global power. And among the 5-6 major powers, India is also counted as one of them, despite not being the member of the Security Council. So these two significant countries of the Asia, these two emerging power, these two Asian giants, naturally their bilateral relations have bilateral, regional and global implications. So that's all about this significance of this power. And then Rabindranath Tagore long back has spoken about the Asian century. And Rabindranath Tagore has said that Asian century will come, it will emerge when India and China will join hand and India and China will rise simultaneously. So the situation which Rabindranath Tagore visualized long back, so that situation has come, and right now India and China both are rising simultaneously. So whatever was predicted by Rabindranath Tagore long back, that rise of India and China will lead to the advent of the Asian century. So if Asian century is materializing, so the China and India's simultaneous rise is important for that. As long as India and China are bickering with each other, fighting with each other, trying to undermine each other, the Asian century will never materialize. So Asian century is dependent upon the good India-China relation. And the same thing has been said by many Indian leaders also. Manmohan Singh said long back, the world is so large, the planet is so large that Indian and Chinese rise can be accommodated together. Indian interest and Chinese interest can be accommodated in this vast world. There is no need of India and China always clashing with each other. And now globally it is expected that power is shifting from Atlantic to Asia Pacific. And here in this shift of the power, the India-China rise is so important, so critical. In place of Asia Pacific, we, the student of international relations, know that nowadays we are also using the word Indo-Pacific. Again, this Indo-Pacific word has certain geopolitical competition because China is not comfortable with the use of word Indo-Pacific, and in place of Indo-Pacific, China is using the Asia-Pacific. Because if China is using the Asia-Pacific word, then naturally India is kept out of this Asia-Pacific. But if you talk about the Indo-Pacific, then India becomes an important part of this region. Anyway, this other issue where India and China are bickering on many issues. So in the Asia, whether it should be Asia Pacific or Indo Pacific, this is another contention. This is another issue of conflict between these two. Certain questions I will try to answer in my presentation while talking about the different theories. So the first question which I will be talking about, that is whether India and China, they are rival, are partner, they are enemy, they are allies, and related to that, as David Malone in his book writes, whether dragon and elephant can dance together. It is the title of David Malone's book. Professor Jha is well known to David Malone. So he has written about it, and he has hoped that probably that elephant and dragon both can dance together, so India-China cooperation is feasible. But here I would like to say that dragon and elephant, if they are dancing together, firstly for dragon and for elephant, for both of them to make big moves, it is very difficult. So dragon and elephant dancing together, it is very difficult. And even if it is happening, it will not be a elegant dance, it will be inelegant dance if elephant and dragon are dancing. So whether India and China will be together, they will be dancing together as David Malone has predicted. So in my presentation, I will try to look into this thing whether it is feasible or not. So first theory which I discussed in my earlier presentation, that the realism theory, the realist theory. So here, this realist theory covers almost half of the India-China story here, because the realist theory, as we know in international relations, talks about the conflict, talks about the competition. So the geopolitical rivalry, which we often talk about in international relations, so that geopolitical rivalry is covered by the realist theory. Realist theory here, I will not be going in detail. So both the realist theory, the classical realism developed by Hans Morgenthau and others, and the neo-realism developed by Kenneth Wall, John Mercier, etc. So both these theories, they focus on competition, rivalry, etc. The difference between these two, that the classical realism talks about the state egoism. So here, the human nature, that is the selfish nature, and the same human nature has been attributed to the state. So state is also a selfish unit in the international system, as human beings are continuously conflicting with each other. In the same way, the India and China as a unit in international system, and that too important unit in the international system, they are also constantly competing, conflicting with each other, and by pursuing the zero-sum game approach, they are trying to increase their power at the cost of others. So, even you see this India and China, they share 3,488 kilometer boundary between these two countries, and this is one of the most contentious boundary in the world right now. And India and China both are also engaged in the longest boundary talk. Since 1980, India and China are talking to each other. It is 41 years. For the last 41 years, India and China are trying to resolve their boundary dispute through negotiation. But till this time, no satisfactory solution has come out of this talk, and many are of this opinion probably these talks will not lead to. Probably this talk will not lead to any solution because probably they are not engaged in the talk to sort out their related differences, but in fact they are just talking to each other to show the world that both are sincere. In fact, if you look at the history of China, because China has settled its boundary with all the countries except India. But China has settled its boundary dispute with other countries only when the other country was a weaker power, not stronger than China. It has happened in the case of Soviet Union also. As long as Soviet Union was there, China has not resolved its boundary dispute with Soviet Union. But the moment Soviet Union disintegrated and China has resolved its border with successor state Russia. Same thing has happened with other Chinese neighbors also here. So China has resolved its border dispute with its neighboring countries only when its neighbor were in the weaker position rather than the stronger position. Since India and China, at least India has not accepted the Chinese dictates, so this dispute is continuing, and despite many rounds of talk, nothing has come out of it. In talks, we say the friction point. What are these friction points in India-China boundary talk? In fact, these friction points are the territory, the places where China has intruded in our territory, occupied it, and we, in diplomatic language, call it friction points. So China is occupying a small slice of their neighbor country's territory. They occupy it, make it a complex fact, and then they present to the other countries that you accept it as a Chinese territory, and they have done it in South Asia, in South China Sea, East China Sea, I said, and the same thing they are doing it here. But here, is salami slicing strategy has been resisted by India. And this dispute, India-China dispute, is not confined only to the land boundary. It is in every possible field. It is also in maritime rivalry. C. Raja Mohan has written a very beautiful book called Samudra Manthan. And in this Samudra Manthan, he talks about the India-China maritime rivalry in the Indian Ocean. China has resisted. China even said that Indian Ocean doesn't mean that Indian Ocean is the lake of India. So India has a dominant presence in the Indian Ocean, and this dominant presence is being resented by China, and China is increasing its presence in the Indian Ocean, and that is affecting our strategic interest in this region, because even if there is any nation ocean which has been named after a nation, then it is the Indian Ocean, which has been named after India, is in the eastern African coast there. So Chinese military presence is already there. They are increasing their naval presence in Maldives. They are increasing their naval presence in Sri Lanka, in the Maldives, in Myanmar. So we are also familiar with the word string of pearls here. So string of pearls is part of their maritime strategy. So they have encircled India from all the sides. The string of pearls word, in fact, it came from a paper written for Pentagon by an American strategic analyst, and he used this word string of pearls. And Chinese have denied that they have any strategy called string of pearls. But whatever name you call it, it is a reality that China has its, they call it civilian port, but the dividing line between the civilian port and naval port is very thin, because the same port can be used for the commercial ships and for the naval ships also in Pakistan. So, and they have some islands, small islands, they have taken on lease from Maldives. So they are present everywhere in the Indian Ocean and challenging the Indian military presence in this region. And China is saying that they are here to counter the piracy because the Somalia, the failing Somalian state has led to the many Somalian pirates dominating in this Indian Ocean region. So China is saying that they are increasing their naval presence in the Indian Ocean to counter the Somali pirates, and they want to protect their sea lanes of communication because this is the cargo passing through Indian Ocean and then through Malacca Strait. This is very important trade route for the whole world, for the Southeast Asia, for the East Asian countries, and for China also. So China is saying that they are increasing their naval presence to protect the sea lanes of communication from the threat of piracy. But in the name of piracy, they are increasing their naval presence in this region, and that is a security threat for our country. And then they have now they call it the Maritime Silk Route. Then again, this Maritime Silk Route is because China has the two silk projects. One is Silk Route, and the Silk Route is ancient land route, and that land route they are developing in the name of BRI, Belt Road Initiative. So they are connecting the whole of Asia with each other, with Chinese market, and they are connecting European countries also, Central Asia also. And this CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is also part of this Belt Road Initiative. So China is having two projects, one Maritime Silk Route and another this Silk Route, the land routes. And these two are threatening Indian vital strategic interest here. China tried to bring in India into Belt Road Initiative in the BRI project, but India, because of its strategic reasons, have refused to join the BRI. In fact, this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is passing through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and so it is violating our sovereign rights in Kashmir, and that is why India has said that we can't be part of the BRI, where the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is part of that. So even these both the Silk routes, Maritime Silk Route and Land Silk routes, both are in fact against our interest, or so far India has not joined. Now, China is also flexing its muscles, and the realist theory says that all those countries which have acquired power, definitely they will flex their muscles. And there is no exception. So Chinese this claim that their rise is peaceful. No one is going to buy this theory. For a very long time, China, since it was focusing on its economic development, they are more concerned about their commercial interests. So Deng Xiaoping has famously said in early part of his economic reforms in early 80s that China should hid its strength and wait for the appropriate time. So now Chinese scholars are saying, with the coming of this Xi Jinping into the power in China in 2013, that the time has come where China has not to conceal its strength. Now China has to reveal its strength, show its strength. And Deng Xiaoping has said that China should hid its strength and wait for its time. So that time now has come. So now China is flexing its muscle everywhere, and it was seen during the Corona period. So now there is another term, wolf warrior diplomacy. So now the China is conducting the wolf warrior diplomacy. Briefly about the wolf warrior. Wolf warrior, in fact, is a patriotic Chinese film. So here, the Chinese heroes conquers their enemies of the China, and eventually the Chinese flag is unfurled, etc. So it's a patriotic movie. So taking the term from there, the wolf warrior, Now the China is conducting warfare diplomacy. Just I am giving you one example. When during the Corona period, Australia demanded that an international investigation team should be sent to China to find out the origin of the coronavirus. Immediately, the Chinese ambassador in Canberra conducted a press conference. Not in China, they conducted in Canberra and threatened Australia from Australia itself that if Australia is demanding these kind of things like constitution of international investigation team and sending it to China for investigation in Wuhan, etc. So China will take retaliatory measures. What will be the retaliatory measures? China threatened that Chinese students will not come to Australia for studies, and Australian educational institutions will be forced to close down. Chinese tourists will not visit Australia. The Australian tourism will be affected. Chinese will not buy the dairy product of Australia. Australian dairy will be decimated, destroyed. China will not buy the agriculture products from Australia. So China will punish Australia, their dairy, their agriculture, their tourism, their educational institutions, because as we all know, the maximum number of overseas students in Australia are coming from China. India is number 2 or 3, probably number 2. So Chinese students outnumber Indian students. And there are tourists also, the large number of tourists are Chinese tourists. So economically, financially, China can punish Australia. So these kind of threat China was giving to Australia, and diplomacy is known for its niceties there. Diplomats always speak in a very soft language. They never use these kind of aggressive language, but this was done by the Chinese. And it was not only in case of Australia, it happened with India also, as you can recall, when India said that the testing kits which have been imported from China, and it was reported that these imported kits are not working well. And then government of India said that they will be withholding the payment to Chinese companies. And the moment this statement came out, immediately the Chinese ambassador in Delhi held a press conference and threatened government of India that you have to make payment, and eventually India made payment. They said it is not fault of the Chinese product. Chinese kits are all fine, no problem with them. You don't know how to handle these testing kits. You don't have the storing capability, because some cold storage is required. So you don't have the storage capacity. You don't know how to handle it. So it is your problem. And for this, you can't withhold the payment to the Chinese company. You have to make full payment. And they said that these kits have been approved by the Indian Council, ICMR, Indian Medical Council. So Indian Medical Council have approved this kit, and the same kit have been sent to India. So the payment has to be made, and eventually India made this payment. Recently, even 2 days back, you must have read in the newspaper, some Chinese companies have been raided in India for tax evasion. It was the Xiaomi, it was Hui, and some other Chinese companies in India. Again, Chinese ambassador held a press conference, and they said that it is a retaliatory move by the Indian government to harass the Chinese companies. Chinese companies are following all the rules of the government of India. So they say this press conference was not in Delhi; it was in Beijing. But there they said that if India is not desisting from these kind of things, then definitely China will also take some retaliatory move against India. So you see this, and this is not happening only with India and Australia. They have not spared any country, because now Under Xi Jinping, now the time has changed. Under Deng Xiaoping, China was speaking a different language, but under Xi Jinping, China is speaking a different language. In case of America also, when America accused China that they are violating human rights in Xinjiang, in Tibet, etc. And so when America accused China for violation of human rights in Xinjiang, Tibet, etc., then immediately the Chinese diplomats, China reacted angrily and accused United States of America that America has no right to give any kind of sermon to China. They should look into their own human rights records, because the kind of genocide America has indulged, the Europeans have done in the name of manifest destiny, because in the name the Americans justified, rationalized the massacre of indigenous people, whether they were Red Indians in America, or other indigenous people in Canada, or indigenous people, Aboriginal people in Australia and New Zealand, and these European countries justified in the name of manifest destiny. So China's argument was, in the name of manifest destiny, the indigenous people have been massacred here, and now the same America is now talking about the human rights. They don't have any moral right to talk about the human rights after committing genocide on such a large scale. So the point I'm making, the China of Xi Jinping is no longer the China of Deng Xiaoping, when they ignored many things, all kind of accusations, criticism of China, just they ignored, because their main focus was on economic reforms, economic development, raising their GDP per capita income, etc. But now they are in such a position where they can assert, and they're asserting. So this Chinese behavior now proving this realist thesis that if any country has acquired power, so its power will be reflected in its behavior. It will flex its muscle. So Chinese claim of peaceful rise of China is a myth. It is far away from reality. And now the Chinese scholars, they don't use the word rise, because the rise word is related to realism, to geopolitical rivalry, etc. So since it is closely related to geopolitics, so they have coined a new term, the peaceful development of China. So Chinese scholars don't use the word peaceful rise. Earlier they were using the word peaceful rise, but now they use the word peaceful development of China. So as far as theory is concerned, so here as per realist theory, if any country has acquired enormous power, so it will be reflected in its behavior. They will flex its muscles, and China is exactly doing the same with India and with many other countries also. While talking about this India-China relation, as far as realism is concerned, so here we can bring Kautilya also, because Kautilya is also part of realism, because Kautilya's teaching is also part of realism. So Kautilya's mandala theory, there's enemy is friend. So now China is cultivating good relations with Pakistan, and China is using Pakistan to tie down India in South Asia itself. So now China is secretly providing all kind of arms, ammunition. They are providing missile technology. They are providing nuclear technology. China is also encouraging its proxy, North Korea, to transfer missile technology to China. In fact, the Pakistani missiles are in fact the Korean missiles. So China and North Korea, they are transferring the technology on these weapons of mass destruction, that includes missiles and nuclear weapons. So China is in fact increasing the strength of Pakistan, so that India is blocked in South Asia itself. And China always treats India and Pakistan as an equal power. China is dismissive of Indian power. In fact, it is another when because it's a weaker power always loves to be equated with a stronger power. So Pakistan is very happy when it is compared with India, and India is unhappy when it is compared with China. And India is happy if it is compared with China, but then again, China is very furious, angry if it is compared with China. So China hates to be equated with India, but India loves to be equated with China. And China loves to be equated with the United States of America, but then again, America hates to be equated with any country, whether it be China. So this thing is there. Pakistan loves to be equated with India, but India hates to be equated with Pakistan. So it is. So again, every weaker power loves to be equated with the stronger power, but the stronger power hates to be equated with the weaker power. So China is very dismissive of India, and China never takes India seriously, and China finds many problems with India, and China says that if China can be compared with any country, the only country is the United States of America, not India. And China has deliberately followed a policy of using India's neighbor against India. So whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Sri Lanka, whether it is Maldives, and whether it is Pakistan, everywhere China is involved in supporting the forces which is inimical to India, which is against India. We are familiar with the what Kohli said and did in India-Nepal relation. Mahendra Rajapaksa also did the same for a long time in India-Sri Lanka relation. And sometimes Bangladesh also plays into the hands of China. Pakistan, China, they are so good friends that when Pakistan diplomats has remarked that China-Pakistan relations are deeper than ocean, higher than the Everest mountain, and sweeter than the honey. So they have described this China-Pakistan relation in such a glowing terms. And China says that India, China and Pakistan, they are all weather friends. So their friendship is bound. But the China and Pakistan friendship, it is in a particular context, and this context is India, because going by Chanakya's Kautilya's Mandala theory, enemy is friend. Since Pakistan is our enemy, China is our enemy, so two enemy of India has become friend of each other. So this Pakistan is another problem. And now, if you look at the confrontation between India and China, so you have a series of confrontation starting from 1962, or even before that, there was also some skirmishes. Then you had confrontation almost every prime minister's time, whether it was Manmohan Singh, whether it was Vajpayee, whether it was Modi. So Doklam confrontation, we had Ladakh crisis is still going on, Galwan incident, we are all familiar, and we know that after 1967, that Nathula incident, the first time any soldier was killed on the border. Chinese and Indian soldiers were killed. The last killing happened in Nathula clash in 1967. Since 1967 and 2020, no one was killed from Indian side or Chinese side. So after such around 40 years, more than 40 years, 50 years, some life was lost. So Galwan Valley is very important in that way, and that tension is still continuing. Long series of meetings are going on, but till this date, nothing has come out. So if we have to look into the confrontation between India and China, the rivalry between India and China, the competition between India and China. So the IR theory, which is most relevant to explain this competition and rivalry. So this is the realist theory. So that's all about the realism, because we have to still talk about the three more theories and the India-China relation in that context. So now I'm concluding this competition, rivalry between India and China through the IR theory of realism. So now I'm coming to the diametrically opposite theory, that is the international liberalism. International liberalism, as we all know, talks about the cooperation instead of conflict. So here, if you look at the cooperation between India and China, so we are surprised that despite this enmity, despite this tension, their cooperation is also too high. And this cooperation is not restricted to only economic field. This cooperation is also in the political field. This cooperation is also in the strategic field. You think of any field, in every field, China and India both are cooperating with each other. So first we start from the trade. You see the trade, the kind of trade India and China are having, it becomes very difficult to say that they are enemy of each other. Last month our trade exceeded, this financial year our trade has exceeded $100 billion. So with this $100 billion, 100 plus, it is $120 billion trade India had with China this year, this financial year. And despite the tension on the Ladakh border and this Galwan incident, etc., and despite banning of the many Chinese apps, the Chinese investment, many punitive action was taken by India. But despite this thing, the trade is booming. And briefly, America has overtaken China, but this year China has again overtaken America. So right now, China is our leading trade partner. And liberalism says that trade and commerce brings nations together. And with this kind of trade and commerce between these two countries, how we can say they are enemy? Because enemy don't trade. Enemy, they are in the eyeball to eyeball confrontation. They don't talk, they don't trade. So if the two nations are trading, then liberal theorists are saying that trade will pave the way for cooperation in other fields, and whatever differences, animosity they are having, those differences and animosity will be sorted out. So trade is so important in the liberal perspective, and this trade is if you see the trade, it is rising, booming, and despite many efforts by the government of India, this trade has not come down. And then investment also, the same story of the investment. Chinese are investing heavily in all the greenfield projects, in all the startups, etc., despite some restriction imposed by the government of India. So their investment is also rising. And then we have Wuhan split. Wuhan split. Indian Prime Minister Modi, Xi Jinping met in Wuhan. Wuhan, we are familiar now because of, it is said that coronavirus has originated in Wuhan, but this Wuhan summit happened between Modi and Jinping before that. So then the word came Wuhan split, and India and China agreed that they will be cooperating with each other. They will not be confronting and competing with each other. And for cooperation, they singled out of Afghanistan. That in Afghanistan, India and China will cooperate with each other. And and then it was also said that because Wuhan happened after the Doklam confrontation. Doklam confrontation, we know this, it continued for 72 days, and it was the longest confrontation between the Indian forces and Chinese forces after a very long, after 1962 war. But this Doklam confrontation ended without any direct clash between these Chinese and Indian forces. So Wuhan happened. So Wuhan split India and China. They decided to cooperate with each other in South Asia, in Afghanistan, and then we have a Chennai Connect. Modi went to Wuhan, and in return, Xi Jinping paid a visit to Chennai. So that is called a Chennai Connect. In Mallapuram, both these leaders met. So it is not only in these two. There are other regional organizations also where India and China are members. Now here I am referring to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it is a China promoted, it is a China dominated security organization. Shanghai Cooperation Organization is not an economic organization, it is a security organization, and Shanghai Cooperation is also called Asian NATO. So it is a Shanghai Cooperation is Asian NATO, and in this Asian NATO, India is also part of it. So it is not only the economic field; they are also cooperating in the strategic field also. And you will be surprised to know that under this Shanghai cooperation, they are also having the multilateral military exercises. And in this multilateral military exercises, you will be surprised to know even Pakistani army is also participating, because Pakistan is also part of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So can you think of this situation that Indian army and Pakistan army and Chinese army, who are enemy of each other, they are participating in a military exercise to fight against their terrorism under the aegis of Shanghai Cooperation. So it is happening. So this can be said that it is happening because of multilateralism. Even bilateral military exercises is also happening. We have an exercise called Hand in Hand. This is a biannual military exercise between Indian forces and Chinese forces. So here no other third party is involved. This is between Indian troops and Chinese troops. And again this hand in hand exercises is against terrorism. So they are cooperating. And as far as then there is another trilateral arrangement, the Russia, India, China. Here again, Russia, India, China, they are the member of RIC. In this format, they are meeting and talking to each other and developing the joint strategy. Then the well-known economic organizations, you know, the BRICS is there. In BRICS, India is part of that. And then there are two banks where India and China both are the part of that bank. The first bank is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the size of the lending done by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is larger than the World Bank. So, and the largest recipient of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is no other country but India. So, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is a China-promoted bank, and in this bank, it is Chinese money. And in this bank, the largest recipient of the development fund is no other country, but it is India itself. And in fact, the Western countries, in fact, the America, many Western countries, European countries are also part of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But America put pressure on India, it don't become member of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But India ignored the American objection and joined the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And then again another bank, that is the BRIC Bank, the New Development Bank. And in this bank again India is part of New Development Bank. And our own ICICI Bank chief Kamath was heading this New Development Bank. And again India is one of the largest recipient of the development aid assistance from New Development Bank. So here the point I'm making, that there are many Chinese promoted, Chinese floated banks are there, regional organizations are there, global organizations are there, and India and China, they are meeting there, talking to each other, and so they are developing, evolving the joint strategy. So this is one field. So you see in the bilateral relations and in the regional issues, India and China both are in the competition with each other. But when you switch over to the global level, you find India and China cooperating with each other. Here I'm referring to two important global issues where India and China, they always join hand. This is one is the global warming, the climate change, the environment issues. On all issues of environment, whether it is global warming, whether it is a depletion of the ozone layer, on all environmental issues, India and China are always on the same page. India and China are always cooperate with each other, and they develop the common strategy. So here in these environment conferences, the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, etc. So here on every climate issue, India and China both are cooperating with each other. And you must be familiar with the acronym, the basic basic, in fact, in the Copenhagen Environment Summit, which was the much talked about the Environment Summit on Copenhagen in 2008 or 9, Obama attended that summit, and Obama made the famous statement that planet is in the peril. So there, India, China, South Africa, Brazil, they formed a group, and they resisted the pressure which was being mounted by Barack Obama on the third world countries on many issues. So these basic acronym came in international politics. It is, and in this basic, along with South Africa and Brazil, India and China are there. So on the issue of equity development issues, because the Western countries, the first world countries, they are opposed to this comprehensive but differentiated responsibility. The CBDR, common, the comprehensive but differentiated responsibility, because they say that this environment is the global problem and responsibility of all countries are equal. But India and China, they say no. The polluters should pay. They are arguing the principle of polluters should pay. So since the first world countries have polluted the environment, so they must shoulder the greater responsibility. So on every climate issue, we find that India and China, they are cooperating with each other. This is one. Another area where India and China are cooperating, the world trade. On world trade, every issues of world trade, India and China again are together here. Because on the issue of agriculture subsidy, on the issue of removal of the tariff, etc., India and China both cooperate each other. In WTO summit, World Trade Organization summit, India and China, you find they are cooperating with each other. They developed a joint strategy to protect the interest of the third world. So in the name of third world, India and China, they are on the same page, they are on the same side, and they are against the Western countries. Again, if we are talking about these Bretton Woods institutions, so India and China both are demanding that Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, it must be restructured, and the bias of the third world countries must be increased, because these Bretton Woods institutions were created in 1945. So at that time, the global reality was different. Now these Asian economies, the India, China, they have emerged as the leading economies of the world, but they have not been given much say in the functioning, in the working of the World Bank and the World Bank and IMF. So India and China both are demanding that these two organizations should be restructured, and leadership of these two organizations should also be given to these third world countries. Because we all know the IMF chief is always a European and World Bank chief is always an American. So America and Europe, they have divided the leadership of these two Bretton Woods institutions, and they have kept third world countries out of it. So India and China together, they are resisting it. And in protest to that, now, as I said earlier, Asian Infrastructure Bank size is larger than the World Bank. So now the World Bank itself is in the process of being marginalized. So the point I'm here making, that it is not all the time India and China, they are conflicting, they are competing, they are also cooperating on various issues, whether it is climate, whether it is environment, or it is world trade, or restructuring of the Bretton Woods institutions, or fight against terrorism. So India and China, they are not enemy all the time. They are also allies. They are also partner. And this partnership and this cooperation can be explained only by the liberal theory. And here the Joseph Ney and Robert Kihon's theory of complex interdependence is most appropriate to explain this increasing partnership cooperation of India and China. So by using the realism, we can explain the competition between India and China, and by using liberalism, we can explain their growing cooperation with each other. But this liberalism and realism is not everything in the IR theory. There are other theories also. So now here I am moving to the third theory, which I said earlier we were talking about. So here we are entering into the field of Marxism. Marx himself has not said much about this IR, but later on, it is, as we all know, the Latin American economists, they developed the dependency theory to explain how this exploitation is happening of the third world countries by the first world. And then this dependency theory, on the basis of dependency theory, Immanuel Weinstein has developed his world system theory. That is a part of our IR theory. Here in this Marxist theory, in fact, the bilateral relations are multilateral relations. So these economic issues have been, these global issues, regional issues, etc., have been explained in the economic terms here. So economic interpretation has been given. So here I will be using this theory to understand, to know the rising trade deficit between India and China and the kind of trade relation India is having with China. So we all know that this dependency theory talks about the core and periphery, but in world system theory, Immanuel Weinstein has added semi-periphery and semi-core. So India and China both come into the semi-core or semi-periphery. So they have certain characteristics of periphery and they have certain characteristics of core. So India and China, both these countries can neither be called that they belong to the core, or neither they can be said they belong to the periphery, because they have certain features of periphery and certain features of core. So in world system, so in this core periphery relation, as we know, that core is supplying the finished products and they are in advantageous situations. And on the other hand, the periphery is supplying the raw material, the primary commodities. And the countries which are dependent upon the supply of raw material, primary commodities, they are always in disadvantageous position, as the dependency theory says, because the price of the finished product is always rising, and in comparison to that, the price of the primary commodities or the price of the raw materials is not rising in proportion to that. So, in fact, the third world countries, the countries of the periphery, are always exploited by the countries of the core. So, if you look at the India-China relation, the trade relation, then you find that this core periphery relation is already working here. You look at the items of the export which China is exporting to India and items which India is exporting to China, then you will find that India is exporting only raw material. The one item which is the single largest item, and that constitutes more than 60% of the Indian export to China, and that is one item, that is iron ore. More than 60% of Indian export to China is iron ore, and China is interested in buying maximum possible iron ore from India. Other items which India is exporting to China again are primary commodities, raw material, some other minerals, and some other agricultural products, etc. So the role of finished product, the contribution of finished product, the share of finished product is almost nil in Indian export to China. And you see the Chinese export to India, it is equipments, it is machinery, it is chemicals, it is computers, it is auto parts, it is pharmaceutical ingredients. So all these materials are being which we call finished products. These are being exported by China to India. So, and India in fact tried to increase its export to China, and India tried to open Chinese market in those areas where it has certain advantage. So what are the areas where India has certain advantage? So at least in 2-3 sectors we are powerful. We can compete with China. One sector is IT, information technology, and related to that, IT enabled services. So here India can compete with China, but on one ground or other, on certain excuses, China has not opened its IT market, IT enabled services market to Indian products. Our TCS, our Infosys, our Wipro, etc., they can compete, but these had not been given the free hand. Some kind of entry has been given, but a lot of restrictions have been imposed. They are not having the free run as they are having in the Western countries in America and Europe. Yeah. China has imposed many kinds of, because they don't want that Indian IT sector, IT enabled services, etc. They capture the Chinese market. Again, in the pharmaceutical industry also, because the pharmaceutical case is very strange, because more than 70% of our this pharmaceutical ingredients, PMI we call it, it is coming from China only. So India is called the global pharmacy of the world. But if China stops the supply of this pharmaceutical ingredients, the Indian pharma industry will collapse. Forget about the word. Indian pharmaceutical industry will not be able to supply generic drugs to Indian consumers. So our dependence on certain pharmaceutical ingredients, India's dependence on China is 100%. In some, it is 90%. There is no rocket science in pharmaceutical ingredients. But since importing these pharmaceutical ingredients for China is cheaper than manufacturing in India, so that is why Indian drugs companies buying it locally, they are procuring it from China because it is cost effective, it's a little bit cheaper. So our industries has been decimated, destroyed. And China also gives some hidden subsidy to their industries. They are dumping their cheap products, etc., and destroying the market of other countries. So China is adopting all these things here. So China has captured Indian market. On the other hand, China has not allowed others to capture their market. We know what happened with Google. We know what happened with Microsoft. China has developed its WeChat because they did not allow WhatsApp to operate freely in China. They did not allow this Twitter. They have their own microblogging this thing. I don't know what's its name. Is Sinbo or something like that. So everything China closed its market, did not allow Google, Microsoft, Twitter, WhatsApp, etc. to operate in China on some ground, and they have provided the opportunity to their own entrepreneurs, to their own IT companies to come up with their own products, and they are competing with the Western countries also. And now they are gradually, their TikTok and other, they are capturing the market of Europe and America and India too. So China has not been fair. China has taken all the advantage, all the benefit of WTO, World Trade Organization, but in a very subtle way, they have tried to protect their market, close their market, and they have not allowed the fair competition, the fair play to others, and it has happened with them. And you see the deficit India is having. This financial year, we had $125 billion trade, something like that. Our trade export to China was something around 30 billion. It was less than 30 billion. It was probably 25 or 26 billion dollar export. And on the other hand, the import from there was around $100 billion. So we are importing $100 billion products and exporting them only 25, $26 billion. You see the kind of trade deficit. It is around $70 billion. So $70 billion trade surplus China is having with India. And this $70 billion is the huge amount here. The total cost of China-Pakistan economic corridor is $50 billion. Means the China, which is making the profit in 1 year with India trade, that is more than sufficient to finance the entire budget of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. 70 billion, they are making profit, that is trade deficit, difference between Indian export and Chinese export, and total cost is 50 billion of China-Pakistan economic corridor. Means in less than 1 year profit, they can build a project like China-Pakistan economic corridor. So China is making money with India, but investing in Pakistan, investing in Sri Lanka, investing in other countries, and creating the white elephant, and later they are trapping these countries into debt trap. We all know sooner or later Pakistan is going to be caught in the debt trap, as Sri Lanka has already been caught in the debt trap. The Harbantota port, in fact, initially it was offered to India, but India refused, because Harbantota is the constituency of Mahendra Rajapaksa, the idea was that Hambantota will be a large shipping port between Dubai and Singapore. And the ships will dock here and Sri Lanka will earn a lot of revenue. And they wanted to reduce the pressure on Colombo port also. But what has happened? It is a white elephant. No ships are going to Hambantota. They are simply bypassing it. And from Dubai, they are docking at Colombo and then going to Singapore. So it is not making any money. It has turned out to be white elephant, and Sri Lanka is not in position to repay its debt. And since they were not in position to repay its debt, now they have given this port on lease to China on 99-year lease. So now the Chinese are operating this port. China or Sri Lanka is saying that it is only for commercial purpose, and China is saying that only commercial ship will come. But who will guarantee the only commercial ship will come? If naval ships are coming, who will check it? Because it is under the control of the Chinese officers. So Sri Lanka can't be believed, China can't be believed. So it is impacting our strategic interest. So whatever happened with Hambantota, the same thing is going to happen with the Gavadar also, because the objective of Gavadar is that the ships, it is going to be an important port between Dubai and Karachi. So their idea is to divert some traffic from Dubai and Karachi to Gavadar, and they are developing a ultra modern port there. But most probably it is going to be another Hambantota. And if they are not making any revenue, not making any profit, eventually it will be leased to Chinese company, and China will run it, and it will be used for commercial as well as for military purposes also. So it is posing a great threat. So China, in fact, the debt rate, they have got many countries. So Chinese financial assistance is not for any generosity, is not for any charity. China is a trading country, and they are not cancelling, they are not waiving up, they are not writing up their loans. They will collect their loan from the recipients, and if they fail to pay their loan, they will be capturing their asset, whatever asset they are creating in those countries. So the China, in fact, is behaving like any colonial country, imperial country, any capitalist country, and they are concerned about their investment, etc. And if the country fails to repay their debt, they are gradually capturing the assets created by them also, and this is also a creating problem. So here again, going by this word system theory, the core periphery argument. So China has converted India into a periphery, and China itself is a core, and China wants perpetuation, continuation of this core periphery relation in the trade relation between India and China. Okay, I'm moving to the last theory which I had said that that is the social constructivism. This is the post-positivist theory, and in IR, this theory has been developed by Alexander Wendt. He's a German-born American IR theorist. So here, the social constructivism, they say, the title of the book of the Alexander Wendt is "Anarchy is what state make of it." So means they see in international politics, you say that domestic politics is characterized by authority, it's characterized by hierarchy. So in domestic politics, we have authority, we have hierarchy, we have law and order mechanism, etc. But at the international level, there is no authority, there is no hierarchy. In fact, it is characterized by absence of authority, absence of hierarchy, and here it is anarchy. Anarchy doesn't mean jungle raj, jungle rule. Anarchy simply means absence of authority. So there is no word state, there is no word government. So every state has to. So if anarchy is there, the only option left is the self-help. Means every state has to take steps for its own security, because there is no authority, there is no mechanism, there is no institutions which will provide you security. So then self-help, then security dilemma, many things comes into that. So here, these three theories which I have discussed so far, realism, liberalism, and Marxism. They talk about the objective reality. They talk about the objective truth. So this objective reality is denied by the social constructivism. They say there is no objective reality. The so-called objective reality is this subjective perception of the individual, whoever is running the affair on behalf of the state. So they say that the interest and identity, which plays the important role. So the interest and identity, these are not fixed, these are not objective, these are not given. The interest and identity, these are also construction. The anarchy is also construction. So anarchy is not given, anarchy is not fixed. This anarchical authority, whether it is a regional anarchy or global anarchy, so this regional anarchy or global anarchy or regional order or global order, it is not fixed, it is not given. What is the regional anarchy, global anarchy, regional order, global order? It all depends upon the perception of the people who are running the affair of a state. So in fact, everything is construction. So interest is construction, identity is construction. So this anarchy is also construction, and in this construction, it is the individual perception, the decision makers' perception, the government perception, the people who are involved in the formulation of the foreign policy, it is their perception which matters. So here, so that is why he famously said that anarchy is what state make of it. So about anarchy, neo-realist, neoliberals, and Marxists all say it is fixed, it is given, it is objective. But social constructivists say, like Genderwend says, that no, it is not fixed, it is not given, it is a construction, and since it is a construction, it can change, it can vary, and this construction depends upon time as well. So it is not a permanent thing. So just I am giving one example, and with this example, it will be clear the response of the Manmohan government and the response of the Modi government. Because this regional world order, the global world order, the regional anarchy, global anarchy, it was same. There is hardly much difference between the Modi government time and the Manmohan Singh government time. It was a difference of a few years. But when in Ladakh some incident happened in Chuman, probably they have come. So in Ladakh region, this incident happened. So it was downplayed by Manmohan Singh, and somehow negotiation started, and some give and take happened. Eventually, they were withdrawn. But same thing when Doklam happened. In fact, the credit must be given to Modi, because Modi took the firm decision, because Doklam is not in India. Doklam is in Bhutan. It is not our Indian territory. So Modi took the decision that Indian troops will go to Doklam, that is in Bhutan. And India said that with Bhutan we have a treaty, and we are committed to protect the Bhutanese sovereignty. And the truth is that even Bhutan king has not requested government of India to send its troops here. Government of India on its own has sent the troops to Bhutan. The request from Bhutan government came later, and Chinese government accused that the government of India armed to state Bhutanese king to send request to send the troops. So this because the perception of Modi government of the situation at the border, that regional anarchy or global anarchy, whatever you say, is different from the perception of the Manmohan government, the earlier government. So if you go by the neo-realism, the structural realism, since in neo-realism, in the structural realism, the global structure and the regional structure, it remains the same. So response will be the same. But if you go by social constructivism, because the regional structure, global structure, the regional anarchy itself is a construction. So the construction of one might vary with the construction of other. So if you have to explain the response of one government and the response of other, so if you are going by the structural realism, so there's the in structure agency debate, it is the structure which determines the behavior of the agency. So structure will determine the behavior of the agency. But if you go by this social constructivism, the post-positivism, that it is not the structure which always defines it, the agency also plays the important role. In fact, the structure itself is perceived by the agency, the actor, the decision maker. So in the structure agency debate, if you go by this structural realism, so agent or actor is bound to act according to the given structure. But here, when structure itself, and structure is fixed given in structural realism. Here, as Alexander Went says that anarchy is what is state, but structure anarchy depends upon the perception of the rulers, decision makers at one particular point of time. So here, if you have to explain the response of one government and response of other government and how this response vary, so the only theoretical framework which can help you, that is the social constructivism. So I have used all the four theories. So these theories are like lenses. You put on one particular lens and you will get one particular picture. You will put on another lens, you will get another kind of picture. So these are the theories. You use realist theory, you will get the picture of competition, rivalry. And you use this liberal international liberalism, you get the picture of cooperation, bonhomie, etc., goodwill. And then you use the lens of neo-Marxism, core periphery, the dependency theory, the world system theory. Then you find this how core is exploiting the periphery and periphery is being exploited by them, and how core is dominating this thing and not allowing periphery to transform its position in this core peripheral relation. So you get a different kind of picture. And here in social constructivism, if you want to see this thing, that how the response of one government varies from the response of one government, and if you want to focus on the subjective factors, because the social constructivism, all the post-positivism theories say that there is no final truth, there is no absolute truth. The so-called truth is not absolute truth, it is a relative truth, and there is no final truth, it is always determined by the time and the space. So there is no ultimate truth or final truth, it is only a partial truth, only a relative truth, and this so-called truth is determined by the time and the space, and it might change in the future. So depending upon which theory you take for your study and on which variable you focus, if you are focusing on the variable of competition, then you have to use the theory of realism, and if you are focusing on the variable of cooperation, then the only theory which can be used is the liberalism, and if you want to focus on economic interpretation, etc., then you have to go for neo-Marxian theory. And if you are giving primacy to the ideational factor rather than material factor, so for ideational factor, for subjective factor, for subjectivity, the theory which is available to you in international relation, that is the theory of social constructivism. So with this, by using the four different theories, I have tried to explain this India-China relations, and mainly I prepared this lecture for the benefit of my own MA students, because I am teaching theory paper to IR students. They must be wondering what is the use of theory when these theory cannot be applied for the understanding of bilateral relation, and that too so important bilateral relation, the India-China. Earlier our foreign policy was Pak-centric, but over the years, now Pakistan has become secondary in our foreign policy. Now it has become a China-centric, Sino-centric. So we are obsessed with China. All our diplomats, we all think more about China rather than Pakistan, because we think that Pakistan is not such a great challenge, is not such a great threat, but China is such a great threat. Even despite our wanting this thing to reduce the role of China, we are helpless. China has entered in our kitchen, China has entered in our drawing room, China has entered in our bedroom, China has entered everywhere, even mobile phone which are keeping in your pocket, that also might be of Chinese mobile. So with this, I am coming to an end. And sorry, madam, probably I have exceeded the given time. I was supposed to speak for 1 hour, but probably I have spoken more than that. So thank you so much, madam. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. T.P. Singh, for a very well analyzed and well articulated lecture. It was a pleasure listening to you. Never mind if you exceeded the limit. Now I would open the session, the question answer session for the students. Please, dear students, you are free to ask any question from the speaker, Professor T.P. Singh.
May I, ma'am? Swati here.
Yes, of course.
Okay, I don't have a question to ask, sir, but I would like to thank sir for this lecture. It's very useful for a person like me who's teaching international relations to MS students this time, and I think some of my students who have joined have benefited from this. They have already written on the chat box. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you, ma'am, for giving us this opportunity. We college teachers to this opportunity to be, to join this group. And thank you so much. And also take this opportunity to invite everyone present to another lecture that's going to be held at 6 o'clock. It's a lecture on Everyday State by Rajesh Dashgupta from CPS JNU. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
May I ask, ma'am?
Congratulations, Professor Singh. It has indeed been a great lecture.
Yeah, I'm hearing, madam. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
I have a question, sir. First of all, let me thank you for such a remarkable lecture, such an insightful lecture on Indo-China relations. As we have rightly remarked, the transactional relationship which is developing between India and China is very much visible with respect to other relations also between other countries. I have a question. Why Indian government is going for so much China bashing and calling for ban on Chinese goods when, as you have rightly mentioned in your lecture, that we are so heavily dependent on China? Sir, please, your views on this issue.
Excuse me, listeners. Dr. Anjaya was asking a question. So we'll first listen to his question, then I think Professor T.P. Singh may answer to both the queries. Yes, Dr. Anjaya.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations, sir. You spoke for more than 80 minutes, very clearly, very lucidly also. Sir, I would like to take you back in the history to 1962 war. You know, one of the closest friends of Jawaharlal Nehru, Neville Maxwell, had written a book on Sino-Indian border dispute. And in that, he propounded a thesis that it was India which was responsible for 1962 Sino-Indian war. So what is your take on that, sir? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So firstly, Sonali madam, in fact, China itself has banned many apps in its own country. China has created such an atmosphere that all the Western big app companies like Google, Microsoft, Twitter, etc., they were forced to leave China because they have introduced such a strict censor that censoring those things was not possible for these companies. So eventually, they were forced to leave those countries, and then China insisted that all these companies, Google and etc., they must have their server in Chinese territory. Unless and until they are not having their server in Chinese territory, by having their server in their own country, America, they will not allow them to operate it. So, because they say that the data, Chinese data should not be transferred from China to America, etc. And since these companies refuse to bring their server in China, some of them who were agreed to work in China, they brought their server there. But many did not agree to this, and they left on their own. So China created such an ecosystem for foreign companies that they were forced to leave those Chinese. And result was that China developed its own version of many apps. And those apps are now competing with the Western apps. WeChat, now people are saying that WeChat is as good as WhatsApp. Even in India also, now it has been banned. Probably it would not have been banned. So this WeChat has become the rival of WhatsApp. So China itself has adopted the protectionist route to give opportunity to its own companies to innovate and gradually become a powerful in China, and later on these companies expanded in the overseas market. So China did the same, and if India is doing the same, so there is no wrong in that, because India is also following the Chinese route, because our apps will not prosper, will not become popular, will not be able to earn any revenue unless and until the Chinese apps have not banned. So China itself is adopting the protectionist route. So India can do that. India cannot take the same kind of measures against the American companies, European companies, because we know how much pressure the Trump and others they are putting on India. When India said that these Indian data will not be allowed to be stored in America, the Amazon, the Google, the Microsoft, the WhatsApp, all these people through American administration put pressure on government of India that they should not force the storage of the Indian data in the Indian territory itself. So there are many regions are there. So the kind of action which India can take against China, the same kind of action India is constrained to take against America. So it's true that Chinese apps are popular and they are earning a revenue also. But since they are harming our own indigenous product, our own indigenous companies, etc., so if our Indian software industry has to progress, has to create some market here, etc., then the ban on the Chinese app is a must for Indian companies to give them opportunity to rise. So, but there are so many, because 100 something apps were banned, but they have cloned it, making certain changes here and there. They have brought another app there. So those 50 something has been banned again. So India is banning, China is somehow they are coming up with some other alternative apps, and they are trying to penetrate in the Indian market. In fact, Indian market is such a big market. After China, the largest consumer of these apps and other things is India only. So Chinese company cannot afford to lose the Indian market, and India is using its policy measures to restrict Chinese companies and allow Indian companies to grow. So there is nothing wrong, and this is also allowed by the WTO. WTO with certain restrictions, etc., allows that to protect their indigenous market. The government can put some restriction, government can ban it. So the same they have done. But despite these bans, TikTok was banned, but now I'm seeing that TikTok has again come. No TikTok messages are there. I don't know from where it has come. So despite many bans, Chinese apps are still present in India. They have some market here, etc. So, and the same thing about Huawei, because of strategic regions. In fact, initially China has pressurized all countries, including India, that Huawei should be given the opportunity to compete into the 5G market. And the Huawei technology is cheaper than the American and European technology. So earlier India government has not banned it, but after the Galwan incident, the Huawei 5G technology has been banned in India, and many countries have banned it. Canada has banned it, many other countries have banned it. But even then, despite all these bans, so China has emerged as a significant power and challenging not only India but the American companies as far as this field is concerned. So this to Sonali Singh ji, and we should try to avoid the Chinese app, because if you want to promote the indigenous companies, we had to take the Swadeshi route, so we can promote Indian companies, and if Indian companies are not there, so we can go for American and European. But Chinese, after all, they are making money with us, and again they are using the same money to penalize us, to punish us, to reward Pakistan, and to create problem for India. So we have a term called narco-terrorism, because the narcotics is sold to those people, and by their money, the weapon is bought, and the same weapon is again used to kill those people from where they have made the money. So narcotics is being consumed by Americans. So Americans is paying for those narcotics, and the same money is used to buy the weapons, and the same small arms are used by the terrorists to kill the American people. The same thing is happening here also in many economic sector also. So we should become, I think, this is my personal opinion, you might agree or might disagree, that we should avoid these Chinese products. At least we should not reward China. We should not benefit China. Sometimes the Chinese products becomes the compulsion. We don't have any other options. So when that is there, so we have to go for China. Even it happened here also, because earlier in the name of security, the telecom companies and the power sector companies were requested by the government of India not to import the telecom equipments and power equipments from China. But then these private sector companies who are in the telecom sector and power sector, they categorically told the government of India that if you are expecting us to provide the cheaper call rate and cheaper power to the consumers, then you allow us to import the Chinese telecom equipment and Chinese power equipment. Only then we can provide cheaper call rate and cheaper power. And if you are forcing us to buy it from Europe and America, then call rates and the power rates will go up. And then Manmohan Singh government at that time then relaxed this thing and allowed the private telecom companies and power companies to import their equipment from China, and they did it. In fact, it is the machinery in which the Chinese are making a lot of money, rather than the petty things like झालर, the बिजली के जो होली और उसमें आते हैं, उनकी ज़्यादा वैल्यू नहीं है. ज़्यादा वैल्यू they are making by selling their telecom equipment, power equipment, solar panel. Solar panel भी चाइना के बहुत सस्ते हैं. Our solar panel और European and American solar panels are very costly. तो जहाँ पे compulsion है, we don't have any option. So there we have to go for Chinese product. But as far as we can avoid the Chinese product, we should do that. At least it will be helpful to the government of India. The second question, Anjaya, yes, Maxwell was the friend of Nehru. At the same time, he was a communist also. And Maxwell, the title of the Maxwell is India-China War. India-China War means it is India who waged war against China. So Maxwell has bought the Chinese line. In fact, a lot of things have been written by Indian scholars, Indian critics against this Maxwell's book. K. Subramaniam, who was the director of the IDSA and father of the present foreign minister K. Jayasankar, he himself has written a lot of things against the Maxwell's book. In fact, Maxwell's argument is that India and Nehru has adopted the forward strategy. So what is this forward strategy? The forward strategy is because this it is said that the McMahon line has the India-China border has not been demarcated. The Arunachal region is called this McMahon line, and this Ladakh region is called Johnson line. So Johnson line separates Ladakh of India region and China on the other side, and the McMahon line separates the Arunachal and the Chinese Tibet on the other side. So here, since it has not been demarcated properly, so when there was Chinese incursion, Chinese transgression in the Indian territory, as perceived by India, because this boundary depends upon the perception, since no demarcation has happened. So India has, Nehru gave the order to have their forward bases, and when Nehru, on the order of Nehru, and Krishna Menon was the defense minister at that time, Indian military was building their forward bases to protect their territory from China. So Chinese protested it, that don't make these forward bases. And they gave warning also that if you are continuing with this forward bases, we will retaliate. And when Chinese say that India did not hear to them, India did not listen to them, then they were left with no option but to take action against these forward military bases. And they attacked these forward military bases and compelled they decimated, they destroyed these forward bases and compelled the Indian troops to retreat, to go back here. So Maxwell's argument is, it is the forward-based policy, it is the Nehru's policy who's ordered Indian troops to have their bases, military presence in the disputed territory, and that led to the war. So Maxwell's argument, the provocation came from the Indian side, and Chinese simply reacted, Chinese simply responded, Chinese simply retaliated. So that is why all those who are subscribing to the Chinese line, subscribing to the Maxwell theory, that it is not the China which provoked the war. In fact, it is the India which has provoked the war, and that is why his book's title is India-China War. So I hope that Sonali ji and Anjaya must would have got their answer.
Thank you so much, sir.
Anyone else from amongst the students?
बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम हो गया सर, 5:40 हो गए.
One Kirti Tripathi has written a question on the chat box. Can you, madam, ask her if she can speak? I can read it also, but if she is still connected, she can ask.
I think Kirti has left. She has left a question.
Hello, ma'am.
Okay, she's very much there. Yes, Kirti. Come up with a question.
Ma'am, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to ask the question. So my question to you is, what importance Russia has in tussle between India and China, particularly in the respect of India's growing closeness towards USA, and at the same time Russia's tense relation with USA?
In fact, you see this Russia, earlier Soviet Union, so India had very good relation with the Soviet Union as well as Russia. Soviet Union, because of its geopolitical competition with the United States of America, and India having no option since America was openly supporting Pakistan and America was against India. So India was left with no option but to get closer to Soviet Union. In fact, earlier Nehru was impressed with the socialist economic program of Soviet Union, and Nehru was impressed with their planning. So Nehru wanted a Soviet model of economic development for India also. And when Great Economic Depression happened, so Soviet Union, because of its because of its command economy, because of its controlled economy, it was saved from Great Economic Depression, and that Soviet Union made rapid development. And in fact, there in American history, there is a Sputnik movement because it was